As they coast through space, we see the foam that the raider left on their ship was some kind of glowing orb that turns out to be a bomb. Page 16 and 17, wait, I don't think it's a bomb, it's actually a tracker. Hello there heroes, I'm the Orange Ranger and welcome to another comically long review. A couple of quick notes before we get started here. One, if you happen to only watch my comic reviews, I would ask you to check out some of my other content as well, but if you do, you might happen to notice that I am sporting a new look. Head over to my Beast X Morpher review and watch the first couple of minutes of that video to see how the professor put this together for me. But seriously, check out the whole thing, and my other stuff. Secondly, you may have noticed that the audio in this video sounds a little bit different. Unfortunately, it seems like my lavalier mic has seen the end of its run. I hooked it up for the start of this video, and it just stopped working. So I'm going to have to get that replaced, but in the meantime, I have to use the camera's onboard mic, and the sound is bouncing around the room a little bit more, so sorry. And if you didn't notice that, I just pointed it out to you, so now you do. Oops. Finally, I just wanted to take one more quick moment to talk about what a big moment this is, not just in the comic series, but in my reviews as well. If memory serves right, when I kicked off these comic reviews, Shattered Grid was just getting started, and I cannot stress enough to you how far away Shattered Grid felt at that time. I wasn't sure at the time, and to be honest, I'm still not now, when and how often these reviews would be posted. But I just did my best to crank these reviews out whenever I could, and heroes, I finally got there. When I posted my review of Shattered Grid number 1, that felt like such an amazing accomplishment. It was the final culmination of the 25th anniversary of Power Rangers, and it just finally felt like I had contributed to the discussion that so many fans had taken part in. However, life moved on after Shattered Grid, and these reviews are moving on as well. So heroes, allow me to welcome you to Beyond the Grid, the next arc of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers story. Now, this was not an official comic event, so the graphics and the theme song for the show have returned to normal, as you may have noticed. This was the new status quo for the book, and many changes were in store. To find out what those changes were, let's take a look at Mighty Morphin Power Rangers issues 31, 32, and 33. So the biggest change is reflected on the inside cover, as it's time for a new creative team to take the stage. Kyle Higgins passed the lead writing baton over to Marguerite Bennett, who, while an accomplished comic writer in her own right, Ranger fans might remember from A Spot of Trouble, a Trini Kimberly story in the 2016 annual I actually liked fairly well. Bennett and Higgins are both quoted on the change in an article posted on comicbook.com. Higgins referred to the aftermath of Shattered Grid as the perfect time to make a change. When we were coming to the conclusion of Shattered Grid, Daphne and I had a conversation about what was going to be coming next and the setup that I had developed for the aftermath of Shattered Grid based on some events that have happened in the series, Higgins said. We both talked about how it would be an opportunity for a baton pass, to build out some of the situation and status quo and let someone new come in and really take it in their own direction and make it their own. It just felt like the right time to step away. Bennett recognized from the start just what she was getting into, following a writer who changed the way many people think about Power Rangers and what kind of stories it can tell. Oh goodness, following Kyle's act, I don't want to misplace my metaphors here, but those are going to be some really big shoes to fill, Bennett said. Getting to read Shattered Grid both as a fan and knowing all of the work behind the scenes at the same time just makes it so rich and powerful. This is sincerely the biggest event that this series in this universe has ever had. I cannot think of a crossover on this scale, and it's just been divine. Bennett also said in the interview that she planned to keep the energy and drive of the story going, and Higgins even referenced a similar change during Daredevil's run, when Matt Murdock was in prison as a new writer took over, and despite being offered the chance to mash the reset button, chose to drive the story forward from there. For the record, Higgins has returned to Marvel to do a 5-issue miniseries for Winter Soldier, so grab that if you'd like to keep supporting his work. But for us, it's on to Marguerite Bennett as the new writer and Simone DeMeo as the new artist. Shall we take a look at what they wrote and drew for us? Let's start with MMPR issue 31 and take a look at the covers. It's something of an event comic, but just something of, so we have 8 covers to go over. 2 I want to knock out quickly together. The retro-sode is Forever Red, which features a ranger we're going to see, hint hint. And there's a Dimension X variant featuring a really badass bust shot of Lord Drakkon. The Forever Color cover this time is green, and while Psycho Green being on here is interesting, what's more interesting is whom is behind Tommy here. The very last person Tommy would want standing behind him, Lord Drakkon. Besides the fact that his visor is black when it's supposed to be red, I really consider Drakkon more of a white ranger than a green ranger. The rest of the covers, it's only a spoiler for 1 page, but what the heck, right? We'll cover this page and then double back. We start on the white space we saw envelop everything when Lord Drakkon activated all the morphers he had and synchronized with the grid. As Promethea materializes, almost digitally, we see a narration by Grace Sterling, saying that at the turning points of history, the Rangers have always been there to use the strength of the grid to make a difference. As the station re-enters space, she reminds the audience of how she was once a Red Ranger and lost 3 of her Rangers on the moon. And as we get to this 2-page spread, I'm going to be upfront with you. The art style decides to play with the page structure and gets very hard to follow at times. It settles down a little as the series goes on, but yeah. Anyway, Torona, who was the Yellow Ranger on Grace's team, points out that the Green Psycho Dagger, a weapon that Grace claimed from the Green Psycho Ranger after her mission, is processing Drakkon's attack and amplifying it like a superconductor. It's apparently what is powering the station. As Torona says, it's the only thing keeping them alive, but Grace decides to yank it out anyway. In the meantime, we see a team of varied rangers helping people on the station. Tanya, Zeo Ranger 2, Yellow, saves someone from a fire. Ranger Slayer, the Drakkon vs. version of Kimberly, no clue what she's doing. This guy probably isn't important, so Cam, the Green Samurai Ranger, no, not that one, the one from Ninja Storm, scans the station and okay, yes, that is the Dark Ranger, an original Ranger seen in the Sentai footage of Kyoryuger, but not adapted in the US for Dino Charge. Who is it? We shall see, won't we? When Grace pulls the dagger, things settle down, and Grace asks Torona to scan their surroundings, looking for other survivors. Torona needs only look out the window to realize they aren't exactly in Kansas anymore. Torona points out that the stars here are fading, planets are breaking apart, the whole universe seems to be dying. Meanwhile, a beam falls towards Tyler, the red Dino Charge Ranger. The Dark Ranger runs in and catches it. Hey, you didn't survive the Vivizords just to get vivisected, did you? Tyler wonders how he would know that, and then his helmet phases a bit. It's unclear whether Tyler catches this, as he says, "What the," and then, "heck," but it could be cutting off who this is, though he denies it and walks away. Yes, the Dark Ranger is Heckle, a character that was on the villain side for most of Dino Charge, but redeemed at the end. I'd love to go into how Heckle is the Dark Ranger, but the comic series is actually going to do that itself a little later on, so let's just move on for now. Torona says there has to be some kind of a door, but Grace says there doesn't seem to be. They've entered a place outside of their reality. Meanwhile, Cam saves someone and cracks a joke that seems slightly off character. Meanwhile, Andros finds Corone, both of them morphed. Mike, Lost Galaxy's Magna Defender, holds a door closed, but then his powers start cutting out. The door blows open, Mike seemingly injured. So, on the top of the page here, the left side is the Rangers, as Tanya we'll call her Sally Slayer's help, her shocked that the Rangers still want her help. Tanya checks in on Mike and shows a good bit of concern for him. Meanwhile, Grace tells Torona to scan for the morphing grid, any trace of it, but he points out there isn't one, and the power they have is low. The rescue team has a few charges of morphing power left, and the dagger is all that is keeping Promethea running. Here at the bottom, we get back to normal as Grace tells Torrona to call the Rangers, and the rescue team has gathered, assessing the situation. Grace makes a speech seemingly to the entire station, informing everyone that they've been stranded outside of known space and seemingly away from the morphing grid. However, they survived Lord Drakkon, and they can survive this. She urges all of the Rangers on the station to offer their talents, even if they don't have their powers. We must find a way home, and if none is to be found, and she doesn't finish that sentence whatsoever. Because next we get a 2-page spread with a really cool blueprint of Terra Promethea, with inset frames of the Rangers as time goes by. 10 days later, Andros returns from a mission, but they cannot find other signs of life. The next day, Corone tells Torrona that, like the others, she felt her suit power stutter when they crossed over to wherever it is they are, and Torrona explains that their power is now limited to what the dagger holds. The day after that, it seems like Sally Slayer is offering to basically sacrifice herself somehow, maybe leave the station, it's unclear, but she talks about how nobody is happy to see her after she served Lord Drakkon, and she wouldn't be a high-stakes loss. But Grace says her survival was a miracle, and isn't that enough? Trying to speed ahead here, a few days later, Mike is giving karate lessons. A few days after that, Cam realizes that he actually has to be the comic relief, and even seems to be sort of flirting with Heckle. 10 days after that, we see that they are so desperate for a cook that they let Mia Watanabe into the kitchen. Hey now, she did go get cooking lessons after Samurai, and the Shattered Grid stuff apparently occurred after Samurai season, so maybe she's better now. 10 days after that, 40 days after Grace's speech, Andros is working on something. Meanwhile, through all of this, Grace narrates that the hope of a quick escape has settled into just surviving and living day to day in this eerie, seemingly lifeless void. Andros has located a distress beacon, meaning they finally found another sign of life. Corone and Sally, and yes, just to be clear, I'm calling the Ranger Slayer Sally to differentiate Ranger Slayer from Mighty Morphin Kim, argue that Promethea is beat up and morphing to save anyone right now would be a waste of their energy. But Tanya says they can't lose sight of what being Rangers means, and Mike agrees, saying nobody dies, period. You might remember that Mike has actually made this speech on this very station before, about how helping others is just the right thing to do. Torrona and Grace bring it around to really the best point. If they keep to themselves, they can survive maybe another 2 or 3 months. But if they help these people, the first people that they found here, it could lead to them getting the help they desperately need. Torrona will monitor the Rangers, and Corone is going to stay so there's a Ranger on the station, surveying the others in the meantime to see what the skills are of others that can help. Grace tells Sally to prepare her team, basically declaring her the leader of this squad of Rangers. The Rangers morph in a very nice splash page. The Ranger scout ship locates a pod and starts investigating. There's barely any sign of life support, and the pod has clearly been sitting out there in space for a long time. Meanwhile, as the Rangers board the pod, Corone is standing on the bridge of the station and suddenly morphs, hearing music that's probably whistling, but maybe music, it's unclear. I'll talk about this more in a bit. When the Rangers see that the ship they're on is totally empty, Mike realizes that this was a trap. And back on the station, we see who said it. Heroes, meet the Solar Ranger. We'll talk about who this is and what they want later, but I figure that by now you've heard of the name of the character, so here's the Solar Ranger. Corone can't believe there's another Ranger and think they might be getting help from a rescue team, but the new Ranger is glitching and sparking and reacts as if they're in pain. Corone wonders how this Ranger can be local if there is no morphing grid. The Solar Ranger responds by throwing energy all around the room with a big whoosh. Corone is demorphed and realizes this new ranger is not just draining her power, but power from the dagger as well. So that's how you get your power. That's why you're the thing you are. 1, sick, burn? 2, what? So that's why you're the thing you are? Do you mean a ranger, Corone? This line makes no sense. It doesn't get any better from there, as Corone then compares this new ranger to Lord Drakkon, a ranger in a world with no grid and nobody to show her a better way. Since Corone seems to be babbling like a crazy person, the Solar Ranger just teleports away. Corone calls Andros, who was already trying to call Corone. He tells her it was a trap. I'm guessing she's figured that out, Andros. They've lost their powers on the pod as well, at a bad time as aliens approach them. I realized that this was a radical change for this series. New writer, new artist, etc. And I do want to give them some time to settle in. But speaking to this issue specifically, unfortunately it was not very good. It's incredibly talky with a whole bunch of speechifying and a whole not lot of action at all. The art is also very confusing with more splashes and spreads that have confusing panel placement, making the narrative very difficult to follow. I'm sorry folks, issue number 31 gets a 2 out of 5. There are 4.5 covers for issue 32. What's a half cover, you say? I shall explain. The main cover for this issue hid the Solar Ranger with an explosion until she'd been revealed in the issue I just reviewed. Forever Silver. Only one really worth noting here is Psycho Silver, which is the first Psycho Ranger that you could believe was leaping into battle with the Rangers, seeing as Psycho Silver wasn't real, but is Zane in disguise. Which technically also means that Zane is on this cover twice, but hey. The second of what we'll call the Reflection variants, Andros this time. And the subscription cover, which I got despite not being subscribed anymore. I think my comic store just picked it up for me, or maybe they did a subscription on my behalf, so I don't know, anyway. It's the Retro-Sode cover, this being the Samurai's journey from Ninja Storm, where Cam went back in time to get the Samurai Amulet and fought his uncle, who would become Lothor. Nice touch on the cover here, while Cam looks half-morphed, his uncle has lightning outlining him in the shape of Lothor. The unmorphed Rangers stand surrounded by lizard monsters. Sally Slayer points out how this is what they were looking for, life forms here. Tanya agrees, but points out that this life is a little angrier than she was hoping. A lead soldier says to kill the Loud One and the Heretic. Tanya had said answered prayers, but a heretic is usually one who believes in a religion different from what you believe. Does he not pray to his god at all? But to leave the others for the Praetor. This is where Corone and Andros report to each other. An arrow comes flying at Tanya, but Mike somehow snatches it in mid-air, which equally somehow sends the arrowhead flying off, but upwards, instead of into Tanya's forehead. Sally then tells the Rangers that if they can't morph, then lay down the law. Heckle asks if anyone has an idea to clear them out, and Sally suggests the airlock. Mike takes off for one, saying he's good for a last stand. He opens it and stays near it, trying to hang on. He nearly slips out, but Sally, she's in shadows, so it's hard to tell that it's her, but you can just barely tell because of her ear jewelry, catches him, saying it's not time for a heroic sacrifice yet, and Cam closes the hatch. Andros checks in with Corone, and she reports that the station is dead in the water. Life support is failing, so they have to find the Solar Ranger to get that power back. Tanya hug-tackles Sally, thanking her for saving Mike and saying she's glad she's there, which ties into Sally's whole arc about having doubts about herself. She then goes to Mike and tells him off, saying not to be so reckless. Mike feels like it doesn't matter if he dies, since he's died once already, during Lost Galaxy when he fell in the chasm and was found by the Magna Defender. But she points out that he said himself that no one dies, and that should include himself. Mike explains why he feels so despondent. Leo was left behind in Drakkon's universe, that's Mike's brother in case you don't know about Lost Galaxy, and he has no idea if Leo is still alive, so Mike is feeling alone. Of course, this feels kind of like a dick thing to say in regards to Corone, who is also his friend and there, but whatever. Anyway, Tanya says he's not alone, and I'm pretty sure you folks can see what's going on here. As Corone keeps reporting to Andros, Sally walks up to heckle. "Hey, Dimples." So this is the same nickname that Cam called him earlier, so I guess it's just a thing. Anyway, she asks if he's good, meaning is he okay, but he points out that the literal meaning of that question is unusually pointed. Sally says he's jumpy, and he says so is she. It gets a little wordy and bantery, though I like how Heckle asks if she likes what she sees, and she responds by saying a skull, maybe a cuss word, and calls him cheeky. I had no idea that Sally was British. She says she's just remembering what it's like to have friends. She pokes at him, trying to get him to confess and reveal his backstory. He won't budge at first, so she asks why he was so quick to get off the station. And I have absolutely no idea what she's talking about, seeing as it was her that volunteered to leave. Anyway, that gets him to start telling his story about how his Rangers come from a different timeline and how he comes from much further back in time. The Rangers knew him when he was... but I'm not that person anymore. Grace tells the Rangers that they have to get the dagger and get power back. Cam says finding it should be easy. It's the only other trace of grid energy in this universe. It'll stick out like the mouth of a piranhatron. Is Corone smiling? Grace, please tell me if she's smiling. Why would Corone be smiling about a turbo reference? Cam says they won't have their powers, but Tanya says they still have some power left, it's just unclear how much. The Rangers are sent images of the Solar Ranger, and Grace orders them to reboard the scout ship and find her. Again with the strange art choices here, as we get rings of images around the scout ship as it moves towards the Amethyst asteroid, which looks like an abandoned starbase covered in seaweed. Another 2-page spread with actual story details. This is really annoying to try and review. Anyway, the building part of this asteroid is actually a tavern, Remy's Tavern. Inside, a few patrons, including one of the lizard aliens from before, comment on how the Predator has been roaming the system, destroying things, and even how it just seems hopeless. In the back room, it seems that we have located the Solar Ranger before the Rangers have. Rust and ruin, Alarian! How many times do I have to tell you? She's yelling at the Solar Ranger for being morphed in the bar, the fact that she doesn't feel like it's safe even there. She says that she didn't want to risk even coming there, and Remy realizes the Ranger, whose name is Ari, is injured with a bad arm. She says the Raiders, the aliens from before, don't know what the Solarix is, but they do know the Praetor wants it, then describing how she boarded a strange ship with a warrior just like her. Remy wants to know where she went, but Ari doesn't want to tell her to keep her out of danger. Remy makes it clear that she feels insulted that Ari hasn't demorphed. A bit right on the whiskery snout, Alarian, wouldn't you say? She thinks a second and demorphs, and that's Ari. It's not like it's anybody we know. Then someone is sorry to interrupt, and suddenly the Rangers are there. No transporting, no effects, just one moment they aren't there, the next, poof! They surround them, and Ari morphs, as do all of the Rangers. Ari is stunned that there are more Rangers, calling this vortex energy. Sally notices that Tanya seems distracted, and she seems to have spotted something, saying they don't have much time. Ari says there's too much vortex energy in one spot, and Remy says they're coming. Suddenly, the crystalline entity shows up, firing down a beam that seems to teleport down the Crimson Raiders. Geez, I guess they moved again after their stint in Las Vegas, huh? The lead creature seems to address Ari, calling her a thief and a traitor, and telling her to return the Solarix. Heckle and Cam realize if these raiders get the dagger, they probably won't have any plans to allow the Rangers to repower their station with it. The enemy of my enemy looks pretty frickin' great right now. Ari calls the raider a spy, and a spider, okay, saying if he wants to drown the world, he should take a sip, throwing some of the wall seaweed at him. I have no idea what's going on. So let's add to all that confusion with another 2-page spread with multiple frames tilted diagonally, making the action confusing to follow. That'll help. Cam asks Heckle if he's ready to dance, and Heckle starts floating somehow. Tanya and Mike step outside of the frames of the comic. Sally flips, aliens get kicked, Remy hits someone with a frying pan. Anyway, the raiders teleport away, Ari telling them to remember how it feels to have to run. But one of the aliens snuck away and finds the scout ship, should I call it the Vigilant? And fires some foam at it. Ari asks why the Rangers are like her. Sally starts to explain it in terms of the Solarics, but Mike makes it more philosophical. The soldiers were fighting to get the Solarics, the Rangers fight to defend people. Andros gets back to the heart of the matter, demanding she give them the Solarics. It was really the dagger that I thought they were after, but I guess the power of the dagger is in the Solarics now. Anyway, she has an interesting response. She says that they will have to kill her to take it away from her, but if they do, that's okay. She's willing to die so long as they take the Solarics far away and promise even to destroy it before letting the Praetor get it. Remy steps in, begging the Rangers not to kill Ari, but Cam points out that's not how they operate anyway. Ari is straight up confused that the Rangers don't want to kill her, and even as Remy says they need to go, since any of the bar's patrons would try to kill them if they heard they have something the Praetor wants, Ari stands frozen still. She finally snaps out of it, saying she'll hold on to the Solarics, but the two of them will go with the Rangers. Meanwhile, the alien reports to the Praetor that Ari has taken off, but they can track her via the Solarics. We see the Praetor, who looks like a generic 90s supervillain. A cloak and hood, spiked shoulder pads, seated on a giant throne, and despite the fact that the hologram talking to him should be able to be any size, I think it's supposed to imply that he's gigantic. The bad has only gotten worse, unfortunately. This was just as confusing. This comic often feels kind of frantic, jumping from one event to the next without taking the time to just sit and explain things. Which is kind of weird because the characters do take the time to go on long speechifying. It's just that these speeches really don't do much to establish any relevant plot details. What little we know of Ari and Remy so far is interesting, but it feels like we're just going to have to wait and see to get more. Some of this might be intentional, making us feel just like the Rangers themselves, lost in this strange new world and having very little details about it. It's just hard to care about a story I know so little about. Issue 32 gets a 1.5 out of 5. The main cover for issue 33 was really our first look at this team and promotional materials leading up to this run starting. There are all of the Rangers on this new team unmorphed. Forever White. We've got the White Ranger ninja powers here, and right below them, the White Alien Ranger, who was the ninja that the things from the season of the powers above her were based on, so that was a nice touch putting the two together. But more annoyingly to me, there's the Cat Ranger down there. Why does this annoy me so much? Because I consider Cat to be an orange ranger, not a white ranger. But her helmet is white. Yeah, and her spandex is orange. Any elements of the suit besides the helmet, even the helmet really to be honest, that are white are elements that are on top of her suit. Her chest plate, her gloves, and her boots. Her actual suit is primarily orange, and Cat is absolutely the closest thing this franchise has had to a real canon existing Orange Ranger. We don't need her to be just another White Ranger. especially when Sam, the SPD Omega Ranger, is directly above her on this cover. What are we saying? SPD had 2 White Rangers? Moving on. 2 for 1 to try and speed things up. Monty Python clip, get on with it, etc., etc. The Retrosode is Dino Thunder's Back in Black, and Tanya is on the Reflection cover. Interesting note I caught scrolling past the credits page here. This book has 3 different illustrators, 2 different colorists, and ink assistants. I will try to point out who does what for each of the pages, since the art has been one of my critiques, but be warned in advance, it's a little all over the place. The art for pages 1, 2, and 3 is done by Francesco Mortorino, with colors by Walter Baiamonte and assistance from Francesco Segala. We see the scout ship flying through the void as Ari questions the Rangers as to why she is still alive. It's when we see the Rangers that we see the first difference in the art. It's a little more cartoonish, slightly brighter, but a bit flatter. I kind of like it, actually. The Rangers insist they don't mean to hurt her, so Ari asks if they're planning to interrogate her. The 2 say how the Rangers have insisted that they are the good guys, but they aren't prepared to believe that based on help with one fight that also helped them. Tanya steps forward to say they aren't going to hurt her. I mean, I suppose she steps forward since Mike tells her not to make any sudden movements. Remy sort of connects with Tanya since they both seem to be something of healers on the fly. Sally is uncomfortable with having the thief that depowered their station just walking around it, but Heckle says she deserves another chance. The implication here being that the both of them are quite familiar with making the best of second chances. This has apparently convinced Remy, who turns to start convincing Ari of it, since they use the same powers. Ari feels like nobody is actually on her side, since they just become targets. "The fluff, you say, and I'm what? Chopped liverfish?" Ari says that whatever Remy is, she's not that. Andros understands wanting to keep people safe and asks for more details about this Praetor. And when he does, I notice that Mortorino seems to use that more Lichtenstein Warhol style of dotted comic art, but only on things that are close to the camera, as it were. Anyway, Ari says that the Praetor is a destroyer who has been telling people that this universe is dying, but there is another he will take them to if they serve him. Ari always assumed that he was referring to the afterlife, but since the Rangers have arrived clearly from elsewhere, he could literally mean another dimension. Remy says there really could be hope for them and pleads with Ari. Ari considers it and reveals to the Rangers what the Praetor wants: the Solarix, a circle on her glove. As we move to page 4, we switch to artist French Carlo Magno, maybe Carlo Magno, I'm not sure of the pronunciation, who also handles the colors himself. Cut to The Ruined Earth, which of course isn't actually Earth, but a world in the void. The people of this universe have known for a long time that it is dying. No new life has formed, and planets wither and crumble one by one. The people have just survived as best they could. As she narrates how feeder planets would blow up and vanish, whether done directly by the Praetor or just the death of this universe, we see a younger Ari steal an older man's bag and run away. The man tracks her down, finding her with a circle of thieves eating the food that was inside the bag. He approaches, but they growl and hiss, and he walks away. We move to the Festival of the Broken Moon, which doesn't seem to be a festival at all, but some people leaving on a ship from a church? Anyway, the priest or whatever is sending these sisters off with a little food, telling them to run away and survive a bit longer. Ari, looking even younger, though I do suppose that she's crouching, sneaks up to steal some of that food. The monk turns and sees her, reacting with dull surprise and saying a question mark. He instinctively starts to morph into the Solar Ranger, surprising Ari and making her back through a weak railing, falling. He grabs her hand, but somehow that makes the Solarix react, flinging him down. He plummets, and Ari races down the stairs to see if she can help. He's buried in rubble, but suddenly reaches through it to grab her hand. He begs her to take the Solarix, placing it in her hand. She says she doesn't want it, but he says that she has to keep it away from the Praetor. When she touches it, she suddenly contracts Youngblood's disease. Or her eyes glow, whatever. 1 page later, her eyes are still glowing. When they stop glowing, she sees that the priest has died. Interesting reflection on her lack of self-esteem in the face of destiny here. She narrates that her friends would sell the Solarics, and even her, for just another bite to eat, and she couldn't blame them. But we don't really see that, as she just stares at the priest's body while her friends gather the fallen food. Coming out of the flashback gives us the most complicated page of the comic in terms of art credits. Page 9 has 4 artists on it. 2 illustrators, Carlo Magno and Mortorino, 2 illustrators, Biamonte and Carlo Magno, though the latter is the same person, and Biamonte is assisted by Francesco Segala. Anyway, Sally tells Ari that it wasn't her fault, she was just a child and she was not given the choice to become a ranger. Granted, not every ranger was given the choice. Sometimes the power chooses you. Anyway, Sally quickly reflects on Drakkon, saying she knows what it feels like to be alone in something far bigger. Ari theorizes that maybe the Solaric senses her reluctance, as it usually stutters and flickers unless she has a clear mind and is reaching out to someone else. She also thinks that the Praetor realizes this, since whenever she shows up and saves someone, a town tends to burn down nearby shortly thereafter. I was half expecting this page to be in black and white, as there's no colorist credited. Seriously, it's not Carlo Magno, as he's credited separately for illustration and coloring. Nobody is credited for coloring page 10. I think it might be a typo, especially since page 9 is credited separately twice, but whatever. Anyway, this is actually a very nice page, a close-up of the Solarics on Ari's hand, as she explains it glitches when she feels negative emotions, each one of them embodied by one of the Rangers. Sally asks if she's ever morphed properly, and Ari says no. Sally says it's because she was alone. As we got to page 11, I started to understand what was going on with the artists here. They decided to do basically all of the flashback art in a different art style, which makes it feel more like a memory or a dream. That kind of makes sense, so we're back to Carlo Magno. Also, the captions are more dates than locations, it seems, as we now flash back to the season the comets fell, seeing Ari hide out as the Solaric shows her animals from Earth? Maybe it really is connected to the morphing grid. She says the Crimson Raiders came looking for the Solarics, and they can be very convincing. We see this evidenced by them holding someone hostage. I'd assume it's some of her friends from the street gang, but then a monster comes up and eats the raiders, and Ari protects the snake woman and faces off against the monster. Ari morphs, and we hear the jingle again. I feel like I remember that somebody made a song out of this music and they had it on YouTube, but I can't find it now, and I can't read music, so I can't really describe the song to you. Again, musical notes in a comic are really meaningless if you can't read music or you don't know the song. Anyway, Ari beats up the monster, even slicing it up. The woman seems to thank Ari, and they give her a ride, maybe? She's standing on the ship next. Her narration is more important, as she says the Solarics is with her not because she's a strong warrior or an intelligent sage. There was just nobody else to take it. Back to reality, back to Mortorino, Biamonte, and Segala. Ari says she tried to find out about the Solarics and any sort of resistance to the Praetor, and found very little of either. All she found were people who were just trying to survive, or that fought back and died faster. She revealed that the Solarics is attracted to a certain kind of energy that she doesn't understand, but it makes her want to protect that energy, and then that power lets her morph. Cam says that it's gotta be morphing energy, and I couldn't help but think that if this comic were written closer to today, he would have said it was MorphX. He says that there's no grid here, though, and she says she's detected little sparks of this energy, crumbs here and there that seem to fall off the Praetor's table. Until she found Terra Promethea. Remy asks if their universe is connected to a grid of that energy, and Tanya and Andros confirm that every universe is. This is the first place they've seen that isn't. Remember, in most cases, the full name of the Ranger's energy source is the Universal Morphing Grid. Reluctant child soldier dedicates her life to fighting a war she doesn't understand to try and save the universe from an evil tyrant bent on its destruction. All in favor of helping her? What was that, Heckle? I'm sorry, I was distracted by how awesome Sally's side shave is. They head back to Promethea, Cam saying that he needs to explore some more theories, and then going on a rambling rant of questions. Ari mentions that she can be tracked whenever she morphs, and Cam confirms that's how they found her, which she calls clever. Andros calls in, and Corone says that while they were gone, the station drifted into an asteroid belt. Some sections of it were damaged, and Grace ordered those sections hauled in and salvaged. Andros reports that they have the thief and they're bringing her in, but not as their prisoner. He asks to speak to Grace. And he tells her that there's a ton of life in this void and much to do. He says that there's much that they never expected, and we see Mike and Tanya talking, Mike strapping her into her seat. Yes, the comic is dang near bashing us over the head with this whole Mike and Tanya thing at this point. They're an item. We get it. As they coast through space, we see that the foam that the Raider left on the ship was... I thought at first it was a bomb, but I guess it's probably a tracker. Page 16, and believe it or not, this is where the series' main artist, Simone DeMio, steps in. She's assisted by Alessio Zano, and since Biamonte is still assisted by Segala, we have 4 artists on this page as well. This is a 2-page splash where we see a holographic Praetor sort of launching a fleet of ships at Terra Promethea. Then yet another 2-page spread with lots of frames and narration. DeMio really plays with the standard sense of comic page layout as the action circles down around the Praetor as we see everyone reacting to what he says.
Strangers, pilgrims, exiles from the lands beyond, give me the Solar Ranger. Give me the Solaris she carries. I will spare you. I will show you the way home. You only live because I still allow it. That is your purpose, and what a magnificent purpose it is, to aid me in my quest. All that is left for you to do is to bring me the girl and the Solaris. Join me.
Remy mentions to Andros that the Praetor is basically Hitler on steroids, having slaughtered billions. Andros remarks that all they have is 6 drained morphers. No Zords, no allies, and no grid. Andros' answer is never, somehow summoning his Spiral Saber despite not being morphed. Ari is inspired, telling him to stop. Protect it. Protect it and it will protect you, just as it has protected me. She basically opens up the Solarix to the Rangers as a power source, telling them to charge up because it's morphin' time. Issue 33 is a marginal improvement. The story just seems to flow better, as the flashbacks and learning Ari's backstory seem to give this story a sense of purpose and direction that it had previously lacked. The myriad of artists on this issue don't really seem to take anything away, since as I mentioned, the whole flashbacks being in a different art style thing gives it a sense of feeling like a distant memory. There's still a lack of action overall, and this issue being annoyingly, intentionally vague. The Praetor seems pretty generic as a villain so far, but I suppose we do have more time to learn about him. I like the relationship between Remy and Ari, and I like how Ari seems to be a character whose purpose is to be an examination of what it means to be a Power Ranger, as she's been one thus far, but hasn't been with a team. Issue 33 gets a 3.5 out of 5. These new Rangers are facing off against a giant fleet of ships, but you're going to have to wait past the next video to find out how that all resolves. Or you could just read the comics, that's something I want you to do anyway. Next time I'm stepping back in time, returning to the one comic series that still features the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, which funny enough is not the one that's called Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Next time on a comically long review, Go-Go Power Rangers issues 13, 14, and 15. That's going to do it for another comically long review. Heroes, thank you so much as always for watching. In the comments below, let me know what you thought about these 3 issues. New artist, new story writer, the new direction, a new team. It's a big change. Tell me what you thought about it down in the comments below, as well as my review of it. And while you're down there, make sure to smack that thumbs up button to let me know if you enjoyed this video. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel to see all of my videos, and ring that bell, get your notifications set up so you'll be notified whenever I post brand new videos like these comically long reviews. And if you'd like to lend any financial support to the channel so I can buy more comics or buy a new lavalier microphone, there are 2 ways that you can do so. Head over to ko-fi.com/orangerangervideos. You can buy me a coffee set at $3 a piece. I greatly appreciate those. Or head over to digitaltipjar.com/orangerangerbid. Toss any sort of tip change in that jar you would like. I'm grateful for anything that lands inside. Until next time, heroes, may the power protect you. When I started reviewing the comics, if memory serves, Shattered Grid was still, yeah. And that event felt such a long way away. The next arc of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers story. Kyle Higgins passed the lead writing baton over to Marguerite Bennett, who, while an accomplished comic writer, good lord, and the setup, that's fine. It's something of an event comic, but just something, what? Just something, oh, okay. The Forever Color comic, good lord. I'm going to be calling this character Sally to differentiate her from Ranger Slayer, blah, 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 blah. 2, what? They've lost their powers on the station, not on the station, farts. Sally tells the Rangers that if, but Sally, I wasn't really sure because it's in shadows, but you can just barely tell because of her ear jewelry. He won't budge at first, but when she asks why he was so quick to get off the station. Again with the strange art choices here, as we get rings of images moving around the scout ship towards the amethyst, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, that's a good place to actually split that. But one alien snuck away and finds. Meanwhile, the alien reports to the Praetor that As we move to page 4, we switch to artist Frank Carlomagno. As we move to page 4, we switch to artist French Carlomagno. Maybe Carlomagno. She says she doesn't want it, but he plummets and Ari races down to see if he can help. Her narration is more important as she says the Solarix is with her because as they coast. That is going to do it for another issue. I could say that, but that is going to do it for another comically long review. Thank you much.